there's so much bad information out there, right? That's going viral. And if a post gets like, and this isn't just on TikTok, I mean, this is Instagram, it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook as well. But if a post gets like, hundreds of thousands or millions of views, that's what the algorithm chose to recognize that, hey, this is a post that people want to see. But the algorithms don't do anything to actually fact check, to see if it's actually accurate or if it's harmful even. And so I started to find my niche in terms of finding videos that were not true or ones that were true and making a side-by-side duet on it in TikTok, as it's called. And either, instead of, I was using Gen Z lingo. So instead of saying it's false, I would say it's cap, C-A-P. And that's Gen Z for not true. And not cap means it's true.
This is the Tom Rowland Podcast. Fascinating stories to amaze, encourage, and inspire you in fishing, fitness, and the outdoors. And we're brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. I started this podcast as a way to connect with my friends, people that I admire and respect, and you. It has been a learning journey that's made me a better person, a better fisherman, a better father, and a better athlete. I'm so happy that you're on this journey with me, and I'd love to hear from you with show suggestions, guest suggestions, or questions. The best way to get a hold of me is through text. You can text 305-930-7346 for the fastest response, but if you prefer to email, you can send that to podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. That's a dedicated email address just for the show. If you like this show, you can show your support by posting about it on social media and tagging me. Text the link to a couple of friends that may also enjoy it, and subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you feel like I've earned it. The website is tomrowlandpodcast.com, and that is where everything lives. All past shows, you can go and listen to any show. You can look up all the different shows that we've done, both the How To Tuesdays, the full links, and the physical Fridays. They all live on tomrowlandpodcast.com. And the social media is Tom_Rowland, ROWLAND, on Instagram, or you can go to our big account, Saltwater_Experience. I hope to hear from you soon. So now let's get on to today's show.
Hey, it's Dr. Brian Boxer Wachler here as a guest. I'm very excited to be on the Tom Rowland Show.
Dr. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing so well. It's so good to see you. I hope life is treating you well. You're just one of my favorite people in the world. And I've told the story a number of times, but Dr. Brian Boxer Wachler is responsible for saving my son's vision and creating the procedure that saved his vision. So a double whammy there. But Turner is doing fantastic. He still has the best vision of anyone in the family. And it's just such a relief and such a pleasure. And I'm just, I don't know, I'm just forever grateful to you.
Welcome. You're welcome. Happy to help. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. And then we did really one of my favorite shows together when you and Stephen Holcomb and Turner were all on the boat together, and we all shared the story of Keratoconus, and just a great show. And you got an awesome big tarpon right there at Long Key Bridge.
My arm is still recovering.
Is it?
All these years later.
Well, it was like a rodeo ride. We had you up on the front of the boat on the Yeti cooler, and it was up and down. I was behind you, making sure you were standing or going to stay on the boat. But good times. That was great. That was really fun. So, keratoconus isn't what we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about your new book and social media. But would you mind just kind of giving a little background about that in case people are encountering keratoconus or don't know, kind of like Turner and I were in that situation, and what your work is all about?
Sure. So the keratoconus 101 is that it's a disease of the cornea, the outer lens of the eye, where it gets weakened because the collagen is weak and it bulges out like having a hernia, like in the groin. And when it's on the eye, it can cause a tremendous amount of distortions, blurry vision, glare and halos at night. And the traditional treatment was a invasive and very painful long recovery cornea transplant. And I had developed these procedures many, many years ago called Holcomb C3R cross-linking that strengthens the cornea and stops it from getting worse. And then also Intacts, which are little micro inserts that help to push it back to improve the vision. So a lot of times we do those both on the same day. And then there's even something called the Vizient ICL, which is a lens implant for nearsightedness and astigmatism. And then 3 months later, or at least beyond 3 months later, we can correct the vision even further, oftentimes with that lens implant. So we have a lot of tools in the keratoconus toolbox now.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's just such a incredible story, your story, and you can read about it in Stephen Holcomb's book that he wrote. Now I Can See. That's the title, right?
Right.
And
right.
And that's how I learned about you, just by doing some research, and then I saw that this book was out and read that cover to cover in one sitting. And then we called up and made the appointment for it. And it was really one of the best decisions we've ever made. But the advancements that you've made with eye care are really amazing to me. And so very cool. You've had a really great career, and your career is taking you in a few different places as well. This is your second book that you've written?
My second book. Right.
Yeah. So what was the first book? Perceptual Intelligence?
First one was Perceptual Intelligence. And actually, it was when I was in Sochi, Russia for the Olympics to watch Stephen Holcomb compete that was my inspiration to write this book.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of ties back actually to keratoconus in a way, why that book even came to fruition. And it's basically the concept that we get so much information around us from what people say to us, what people, send to us on emails and social media, or we watch on TV or listen to, that we are always challenged to understand how to separate what's real and what's not real or not true. And so the concept of perceptual intelligence is like we have a perception instead of emotional intelligence. We have like a perception intelligence to how to separate the fact from fantasy. And that's what the book is about. Like basically critical thinking, how to be a good critical thinker and check some of the things that lead us astray at the door. So we can always be nobody's perfect, of course, but be as accurate in our assessments of whatever information we're, being hit with.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that the Olympics, when you were there, was your inspiration. What about that trip to the Olympics made you kind of think about perceptual intelligence in a different way, or a way that you wanted to write a book about it?
I saw this huge disconnect between what was really happening on the ground in Sochi in Russia and what Putin was saying and portraying in the press.
Huh.
And it was really the Putin observation that was my inspiration, actually.
And then for a guy like you, who is obviously very busy, you're a world-renowned eye surgeon. I guess, do you call yourself an eye surgeon?
I'm an eye surgeon.
Okay. I guess it's surgery it's definitely surgery when you're putting in the Intacts. But anyways, you're a world-renowned eye surgeon and obviously very busy. Where do you find time to write a book and research a book and put a book together and publish a book and market a book? And I mean, there's so much that goes into it. How do you
Oh my
do that?
gosh. There's so much in the first book, as you mentioned, Perceptual Intelligence. I had no idea. I was just like, the kid just like, oh, great. Well, we're going to do a book. This is going to be fun. And then it's like, oh my gosh, like, right. First of all, getting an agent to sell the book is a whole process. And then writing the book proposal, because what people don't realize for nonfiction books versus fiction, like Harry Potter, for nonfiction, you don't write the whole book at first. You literally have a business plan for the book. And like, what's the market for the book? What are competitive titles? How are you going to market the book? What's your platform? And then you have a sample chapter. And then when a publisher, buys it, then you actually write the book. Whereas Harry Potter, for example, like J.K. Rowling wrote the book first. And that's the way it works in fiction. Then they go out and read the whole book first before a publisher gets it. So that was a whole ordeal. And then when you finish the book, now is the process of helping to get it in people's hands, right, which is a whole nother chapter of the process. So just writing the book, you don't just go, oh yeah, I'm done. No. Now you got the whole other second half of that train you got to like pull.
Right. And I'm sure that some people do it much better than others. And, you learn a few things after you've written one and done this before. So what do you have in store for you now? Is this the beginning of the book tour, I guess is what you would call it now that you've finished this new book?
Yeah. So this is really the beginning. And actually I should answer the question, how do I have time to do all this stuff?
Right. Yeah, that is the question.
By the way, so I want to give you the background because a lot of people don't realize how the book industry works when you see a book on a shelf or on Amazon. But that's the background. But basically, I just try to be as efficient as I can with my time. And for this current book, which is about social media, like a deep dive into social media, how it affects us, good and bad, because there's great, and then there's also bad and evil on social media. And the book really does a very deep dive because, I'll explain how I even got into social media in a moment, but I just work really efficiently. And I got in a lot of trouble once, but I was at one of my daughter's volleyball tournaments in Florida. And what I did is I didn't go to any of the dinners. I didn't do anything with the parents. I was really sort of an absent volleyball dad. And just stayed in the hotel writing a very, very detailed outline and doing the research and kind of putting together like about a 45-page, very detailed outline of the book. So I just find these times when I can just work really efficiently and try to make every moment count, I guess. And with, of course, downtime too. You have to always have downtime.
Yeah. Are you a morning guy when you write? Is that one of your more productive times, or evening, or middle of the night, or what's your most productive writing time?
Yeah, usually mornings. Because by the end of the day, I'm a little bit like, oh, okay, I just want to chill. Yeah. So mornings is usually really good, or weekends as well. Or if I'm on a plane, I'm not watching movies like during the book time. Like I was actually writing on the plane a lot. So
nice. Okay, so now we get to what the book's actually about, the social media. So how have you? What's your experience with social media and that leads you to write this book? I mean, I know you're doing the cap, no cap. I watch that all the time. And I'm sure that's given you some sort of a different perception of what's going on with social media. But how did this, where did your interest in this come from?
Really during the pandemic, my daughter said to me, Dad, there's some really good doctors who are on TikTok and they give great information. We can get you started because like we're on TikTok a little bit. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of fun. And I had a lot more time because it was the pandemic in the beginning 2 years ago. And so they got me started and I started observing what people were saying and doing. And I thought, there's so much bad information out there, right? That's going viral. And if a post gets like, and this isn't just on TikTok. I mean, this is Instagram, it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook as well. But if a post gets like, hundreds of thousands or millions of views, that's what the algorithm chose to recognize that, hey, this is a post that people want to see. But the algorithms don't do anything to actually fact check, right, to see if it's actually accurate or if it's harmful even. And so I started to find my niche in terms of finding videos that were not true or ones that were true and making a side-by-side duet on it in TikTok, as it's called. And either, instead of, I was using Gen Z lingo. So instead of saying it's false, I would say it's cap, C-A-P. And that's Gen Z for not true. And not cap means it's true. So I started doing that and people really started loving that. And I started to get a hat. I'll show you my hat I made. I'll show you the original, the OG hat. And then I started to actually make merch, actually. So like you wouldn't have ever, I would have never thought that this would have been where I would be like 2 years ago. I would say, what's Brian going to be doing in the mirror? Be like, this is not where I think I'm going to be, but let me show you. So then, and I wouldn't even oftentimes say a word. I would just be watching and reacting and say, like at the top of the video, like doctor reacts to like lemon juice for acne or whatever the topic is. And then let's play the cap game. And then I'd be watching and reacting and doing some like funny expressions. And then at the end, people are really curious, like, Groundhog Day, right? Is Puxatawny Phil going to come out or not? So they wait till the end to see what happens. And so if I put this on, this means that it's like not true, cap. And that was the OG one. So it was just literally a piece of paper with like a Sharpie.
Yeah.
And then I upped my game and I actually went with the actual like, embroidered caps. So
there you go.
So that's sort of what I'm known for, actually, for doing. And, it just really developed. I got to learn a lot and I got to meet other influencers and become friends with them. And then it was like, wow, this is actually at the time I was already thinking about doing a book on social media. And then this just really added fuel to the fire with my direct experience now in it as an influencer and knowing other influencers for the beginning of how this book sort of came to blossom into what it is today.
Yeah. So it's fascinating because I think about social media all the time. I mean, we are, my other son that I don't know if you've met yet, Hayden, he just got back from a trip and he was a leader for this group called Moon Dance. And he went over to Europe and one of their main rules was that no one could use their phone. Like they're totally unplugged, no social media, they couldn't even really, they would just have very specific times that they could even call home and say that everybody was okay. And no news is good news. And it's really back to the way it was when you and I grew up. Like if you don't hear anything, that's good. Right. And so he is coming off of this period of no phone for, 75 days and no social media and everything. And we were having good conversations about that. Meanwhile, I'm just even watching my own habits of how they've changed, of even if you're just bored for a second, you pick up your phone and look at it and just wondering like, okay, what is that doing to me? Which is one thing because I actually know what life was like before social media. And then there's this whole other world of what is it like for someone who has never known a world that doesn't have social media? And what does that look like? And what is that doing to a whole population? And I'm assuming that you're getting into that in your book, but what a crazy conversation you could even just have with anyone about that. But I'm really interested to hear kind of your thoughts on that and where we're going and what to expect out of this period that we have.
Reason why social media is so powerful and keeps growing and it's not going away anywhere. So, if you're a parent and you're like, well, I'm just not going to allow my kids to be on it, or I'm just going to just ignore it. Like that's not a good approach because first of all, social media is, even Facebook, right? That's social media and most adults are on Facebook. Their kids aren't, but that's also social media. So what it does, the reason why it's so effective and at times very addictive. And I even went through an addictive phase too, that I talked about in the beginning of the book. That was a surprise to me, almost sort of like, having somebody that's treating a condition and then they become victims of the condition itself. So because there's a neurochemical in our brains called dopamine. So like, when you do something really amazing, like let's say you have a great workout, you accomplish something, whatever, chocolate, when people do drugs or they gamble and then they hit a jackpot or they get a big win on a hand, that's stimulating this neurochemical called dopamine, which is like the feel-good reward chemical. That's what makes us feel good, right? So gambling, like classically, especially on a slot machine, is the classic for stimulating dopamine because it's also random. You don't know when you're going to get that payout, which the randomness is what actually makes it even more addictive.
Mm-hmm.
So social media is like that because, you're scrolling through your feed, seeing video after video as you scroll, and you don't know which is going to be one that's going to be really entertaining or educational or just grab you. And it's that unpredictability of the hit that makes it so addictive. And the algorithms all know that. That's why when you are seeing your feed, that's not going to be the same as anyone else's feed because it's based on your own psychology on what you like to watch. So the algorithms are smarter than we are. And most people think, oh, this is what everyone else sees. But it's not. It's actually curated and catered right to the individual.
That forms almost like an echo chamber of like whatever you're thinking is now completely reinforced with social media. And that becomes dangerous in politics or any sort of, anything that people think about as fervently as a religion, even like your diet, like veganism or carnivore or paleo or whatever. If that's what you're into, that's what you're going to see. And it's like, well, everybody's into this. Like this is what the world is like, but it's like this is what you want to see. And it's just being reinforced over and over. And I guess that's based upon, even if you were to pause on a video or if you were to watch one twice or you were to like a video or I don't know, but it's I would imagine that it's probably using the camera on your phone to even see how your eyes are moving on the video and what you're looking at. And if it doesn't do that yet, it probably will in the future. It seems very sophisticated.
Oh, much more than people realize. There was a great documentary called The Social Dilemma on Netflix. And I quoted some really key interviews from some of those people who were the engineers, like at Google and behind the scenes, and like their insights as well that I discussed were just mind blowing, really.
Yeah. And one of the things I remember about that is several of them said that they wouldn't let their kids be on social media.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So where do you think this is headed for this generation? Like I agree with you strongly that when you're having this discussion with your children about, can I get a social media account or whatever, to like we went through that with Turner, the one of my sons that and when he was young, Facebook was basically the only social media. I remember him coming home and saying he wanted a Facebook account. And at first we were kind of like, no, you're not old enough for that yet. And then I started thinking, is there a way that this could be a teaching moment that we could show him how to, like, social media is not evil. There's a lot of good things that are with social media. And if you learn how to do social media, you can learn how to market your business, or you can learn how to do all kinds of things. And so I was kind of like, if you just say no, then you're like this social pariah that it's like this one big thing that you don't do that everyone else does. I'm not sure that that's the answer. But what did you come up with in your research for this and all the different people that you're talking to? Like what do you think is the best way to coach your children on social media?
I think first of all is you want to understand what social media is, especially as a parent. Okay, so and there's actually research that shows this. They have two groups of parents. One group, their kids were on social media, but one group of parents were like, we're not going to learn about it. We're just going to try to coach our kids about it. The other group were encouraged to get on social media, get an account for themselves. They don't have to post per se, but at least they're in there. They kind of see what's going on inside, sort of behind the curtain, if you will. So it's not scary anymore. And the group of parents who were involved with social media had much more success helping to modulate their children's behavior on social media. Now, why is that? The reason is because they are talking to their children from a position of experience. Like, yes, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. So I think that, let's take a look at the influencers you're following. I'd like to see the influencers you're following because they're savvy enough to know that there's even influencers, right? Versus the group that were just like keeping their head in the sand of the parents that were in that group. So they were able to speak and have more credibility in those discussions with their kids to help modulate their behavior. So I think that's a key takeaway that we talked about that research had shown is if you're a parent, don't be afraid, like set up an account just so you understand whichever account your children are on, and then you can swim around there and you see what it's about. And then you are able to communicate better with your kids about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's probably true for almost anything with your kids. If you can come talk to them from a place of like, I guess the difference between empathy and sympathy is the way it's always been kind of explained to me is like somebody's in a hole. You look down in there and you say, "Oh man, that's terrible. Feel sorry for you." And then that's sympathy. And then empathy would be to get down in that hole with them and be like, "Okay, now we got to figure out how to get out of here." And that's exactly. An explanation of the difference between those two words. It just made me think about that with social media of like, okay, I'm going to get in here with you and we're going to explore this together. And I'm going to kind of explain why I don't think that's a really great influencer for you to follow. And maybe this one is. But
because there are some influencers who are amazing and really inspire people and teach people and educate people and entertain people in a safe and healthy way. But then there's some others who really have made perhaps dark intentions, and even cults have found that social media is a very, very potent breeding ground. And we have a whole chapter in the book about cults, which people think like, oh, those are like the Hare Krishnas. But no,
there's a lot of different kinds of cults.
Aren't looking like cults. They don't look like cults. They're not easily identified, but they're out there. And there's a darkness, in that world too.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so cults are, I mean, I don't know why that would be surprising to me. I just haven't heard that really before, but I would imagine that, cults have always looked for places where you find young kind of displaced people, or a young displaced person is a college student. Like they're not at home anymore. They're at this new place. They don't have a lot of friends. They're looking for a place to belong. And here come these people that seem really super nice. And then next thing you know, they go to a weekend retreat, and then they start to get their brain molded around, well, I really like what these people are saying. And then that goes on and on and on through some seemingly harmless things to now we want all your worldly possessions and we want you to move over here. That's like the long story, but I mean, that is kind of the cult story. And so now you're saying that it's ripe on the internet for cults to be in communication with kids and, well, probably of people of all ages, right?
Yeah. I mean, anybody, like you said, you identified a really powerful risk factor, which is somebody who's displaced, who might be an outsider because they moved to a new community. Could also be for a job, not just college. And the person in the cult comes across as, I'm your friend, I'm not critical of you, unconditional love and acceptance. And especially if somebody's had challenges from previous chapter in their life with those issues, then this could be like, oh my gosh, somebody really accepts me for who I am. This is great. So, I mean, who's not going to be gravitating towards somebody who's not being critical when used to being, criticized, and, unconditional acceptance and love. So, and it's like an individual person who's coming across in the cult like this. It's not like a group of people like with a big banner that says, hey, we're this cult, right? It's so under the radar that, people get fooled. They don't realize what's happening through that process.
Wow. Another thing that almost everyone has to encounter if you're on social media and you're active at all, and if you're any sort of an influencer, are the haters and just the negativity. Do you go into that in your book? And
definitely, yeah, we talk about trolls because even if somebody's not an influencer, there's still trolls out there that will, through very easy anonymity, make terrible comments, insulting comments that can really weigh heavily on people psychologically. So handling trolls is really important when you're on social media, but even especially for kids and teens, because, their brains are still developing. The frontal lobe is the higher order, command center, the CEO of the brain. And it's usually not fully developed until, on average, about age 25. So people that are younger than that, they don't have all the tools necessarily to be able to handle some of this criticism that can be really sharp and really stabbing.
Right.
And so handling trolls is really important, even to talk to your kids about trolls and how to handle that on social media as well.
Do you think that there's anything to the argument that, like you're saying that, your frontal lobe's not developed until you're 25 and you're not capable of dealing with trolls, but we've never had trolls until just recently, right? Do you think that there is any argument to be made that this new information that's coming in and these new influences and this whole being brought up around social media would somehow allow people that are much younger to develop much quicker in that capacity? I mean, is there anything to that, or is it? I mean, I heard Joe Rogan having that conversation about, and he didn't say it like that. What they were saying on his show was that there's this common thing that a tribe should be like 50 people or 150 people, that's how many people that you're capable of having relationships with, right? And now we have 30,000 followers as a small account, 250,000 followers as a small account. Some people have millions, and how can we possibly develop quickly enough to where we can manage 30,000 relationships when we're really only capable of 50 or 100? And Joe Rogan had an interesting kind of idea there that maybe this new stimulus that would allow us to develop in a different way to where we could handle more of that, but we haven't been in this period for long enough to know. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think still the human brain is only capable, it only has so much bandwidth.
Right.
And so if you have the relationships in person, that can be maybe a maximum of 50 really solid relationships in person. What makes a relationship? It's time spent with that person. It's you sharing information and hearing information back from them over a period of time. Therefore, you have a relationship. So when you have, let's say I've got, between all my platforms, like 3.4 million followers, there is just no way I can have a relationship with even a fraction of that amount of people. Even though the technology in theory exists that you're friends or you're friends on Facebook, quote unquote, but to really have a true relationship, you still need to have those basics. And digitally, I've met good friends, other influencers through my experience, because we've had communications back and forth, or we've had phone calls, we've talked, we've had real communication, we've had meaningful communication. I guess that's probably the key word. Is the communication meaningful for the two people? Because remember, relationships takes two sides, right?
Right.
And I think for most of those people, nobody could say that it's a meaningful relationship between millions of followers and the influencer.
Mm-hmm. Where that could be, distorted by a young person, or really anyone, I guess, that you're following this influencer and you left a comment and then they commented back. So now there is this back and forth thing. And is that a relationship? Well, to one side of it, it is. To the influencer, they're just throwing a thumbs up in there or whatever and trying to keep their account active, or maybe it's not even them. Like it could be somebody else managing their account. But that's kind of a funny kind of situation that we're finding ourselves in, is that one side feels like they're in a relationship with this person. It's not even really a
100%.
person. It's a weird thing. It's a weird
and actually
thing.
There's a name for it.
What?
It's called a parasocial relationship.
Okay.
PSR. Yeah, PSR. In psychology, that's what it's called with social media, because somebody, the follower, feels that they have a relationship, which is part of the intimacy of social media, which on one hand is great, right? I mean, as you can tell, I take a very balanced view about social media. It's not all bad. It's not all good. There's a balance. It's like a candle.
Mm-hmm.
You can use it for illumination, but you can burn yourself really badly too. So that's the way I view it. So with this parasocial relationship, the follower, because of the intimacy of the influencer sharing videos like in their home or in, they let them into their world, which is one of the nice things about social media. There's a personal component to it, at least to one side, versus a conventional celebrity like, most of your big time celebrities, like you really don't see anything of their personal world, right? You see them on camera portraying somebody else. But social media has this authenticity. That's the key. That's the key difference, is people, when they're, true to themselves as they present themselves, they're authentic. That brings in that relationship, or the pseudo relationship, so to speak. That's the parasocial relationship.
Yeah. Wow. And do you go into that in your book?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then I guess that's what a really great influencer does, is they, just like a great communicator, and you can hear about stories of people meeting great politicians or whatever. They may not agree with that politician, but they got to meet them, and immediately they felt like they were the most important person in the room. And they were like, that guy is amazing. Right. Well, 10 minutes before you met them, you were saying that they were a crook. Right. But then you got in there, and this person has this X factor of this personality that just draws people in. You could see, I'm sure Barack Obama's like that. I'm sure Bill Clinton's like that. I'm sure lots and lots of politicians that we all know are like that. And they have this huge personality that when you're with them, you feel incredibly important. To them, that's just one of their qualities of their personality that makes them a great politician, or a great band leader, or a great, rock and roll singer, or a great, cult leader, right? Like that's just one of the things that they have. But I guess to portray that across the internet and to have that as part of your social media kind of image, that's also what you're really looking for, is somebody that can really put that out there and make people think that they have this relationship with them, and they're more magnetic to more people. And I guess they get more followers, right?
Yeah, they share their personality, and they come across as authentic. Hopefully that matches the real deal behind, the camera. But the element of authenticity is key. And also the equivalent of, like, when you're talking about like some of these presidents that can make people feel so special, like they're the only person in the room when maybe they're talking to them. When an influencer comments on one of their posts, like a follower makes a comment, like there's lots of comments on the posts. Well, influencers will comment on some of those comments. Mm-hmm. And those followers who get that comment, it's the equivalent of speaking with Bill Clinton and feeling like you're the only person in the room, because the influencer commented on your comment on their post, and it makes them feel incredibly special. And it's the same thing in certain respects.
Yeah. What about the influencer themselves, and just creating this persona that you have on your social media account? Could that be a trap? Could that be something that you now, maybe that's not really you, but you play this great character that draws in followers, and now has to be you? Like, is there a trap there for some people?
There's a really dark example that we talked about in one of the countries in Asia. There was his name is Ridoy Babo, and he has about 80,000 followers, which, for that country is pretty sizable. I mean, that can fill like a soccer stadium, it's a lot of people, 80,000 followers. And he on his account seems like this nice playboy dancing around, having a good time at parties. And then he would ask, put out there for if there were girls who wanted to come and maybe audition or work in his, facility, or maybe, apply to get a job. He had thousands and thousands of women come to apply and audition. And what it ended up being was a sex ring that these women, some of them were actually abducted, raped in hotel rooms, and then sold into the sex trade industry.
Wow.
And, his account, and he's been arrested since, but his account is still up, actually. Wow. But here's an example of somebody who portrayed themselves to be one thing, but in reality, they were very, very different and quite sinister.
Yeah. I can imagine that there's plenty of that going around. Maybe not to that degree, but
I think a key message is if an influencer ever asks for a one-on-one meetup, no, never accept that. No, that's a red flag.
Yeah, I would think so. But there are meetups, right? Like where all, hey, we're going to be at this place and all of my followers can come and, hang out. Right. And there'll be lots of people.
I think that's a little different because you have a large group of people. But again, this Babo character did the same thing, and it turned out to really be a very dark undertaking for some of those women who went. So even if you go to a group meetup with an influencer, you still need to have your critical thinking, perceptual intelligence, if you will, really honed in. For if anything starts to seem a little bit unusual or there's some other red flags, then you need to be aware of it. But a one-on-one meetup, if an influencer says like, hey, let's you and me meet, I'd like to meet you and talk to you, never accept that. No, that's a one-on-one meetup in person. That's a red flag.
Yeah. And that could be sinister. That could be occult. That could be whatever. All the things that we've talked about, right?
That's unusual. Yeah.
So we talk about on this podcast a lot. We talk about the delicate balance of social media and fishing, because like fishing has been kind of a secretive sport for a long time. Like you have these places where you go and you don't really want anybody to know, because then they'll go there. And so there is this real fine balance, because on the one hand, social media has been very good for the sport of fishing, because you can show people what you're doing out there. You see them catching these big tarpon or big snook or whatever, and then they want to go. So there has been, and it has helped to bring a whole younger audience into fishing, because now fishing seems really cool. But there is this real fine line between, like, what are you doing? Are you exploiting your spots? Are you damaging the environment even by putting too many people in a place that many people never were intended to, in this somewhat obscure place? And I'm sure that you run across this in other things besides fishing, of like, how do you balance social media and the pressure that social media can bring to like a natural place by, you have a vlogger that's going around to the national parks and shows, this beautiful place where probably in history there's never been more than 100 people there at the same time, and then they show you exactly how to get there and exactly what to do, and the next weekend there's 700 people there. Like,
right.
Did you run into in some of your research about different ways that social media is affecting, things that I'm probably not even thinking about? Fishing is one. The outdoors is certainly one where you're putting a lot of pressure on some area, but I just wondered what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's going to be a natural extension of being covered in the old days by a magazine that talks about, oh, this was a great vacation I went to, and this is like what I did. Maybe it was Reader's Digest. Maybe it was, some other, maybe it was a fishing magazine even, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's just extending that concept. So I think there has to be some responsibility and consideration of what that natural resource is to make sure that the making people aware of it component doesn't actually end up harming it accidentally or inadvertently.
Yeah. So where are we going with all of this? What do you think after you do all this research and you become an influencer yourself, and you have this huge following, and you have a niche that you're doing, but you also have this whole other life that you live as a real doctor and a world-renowned eye surgeon. You have a different perspective. Now you're even an author on this, and you've done all this research. Where are we going with social media? Like, I don't think it's going away either. I agree with you there. But where is it going?
It's going to continue to grow, and people need to understand what the risks are to themselves, especially the addiction component, because I went through this phase where when I was growing like crazy, and literally I was like dopamine sloshing around in my head with all these viral videos, and and then what you get in the habit of like refreshing on your phone to see how many more views you've got, right? Because it's a natural thing. Like, oh my gosh, like how many more hundreds of thousands that I get in the next 5 minutes since I refreshed it. So there's this addictive component like we talked about because of dopamine. So I think number one, it becomes even more important to understand how can we have a healthy relationship and not really interfere with the real relationships we have in life. Because I experienced that downside where at that time, my social media sort of addiction was starting to interfere with some of my family relationships. And I sort of went into more detail about that in the beginning of the book, which I've never really talked publicly about that until really the book came out. But, that was also just part of my experience, knowing what happens. And all the other influencers I interviewed for the book all had some component at some time where it was interfering with their personal lives. And, an influencer isn't above it more than a follower or a user on social media.
I would think they were even in more danger because there's more dopamine. Like if you're looking at your account and it's like, well, I got 5 likes. Oh, 7 likes. Or you look at it and I have 70,000 views. Now I have 150,000 views and 5,000 comments. I mean, it seems like that's just more. Or do you become numb to it at some point to where it's just like, it's 100,000. What's 100,000? I
mean, I think after a while there's a desensitization period for influencers to some degree, but still there's always the temptation. Okay, what's happening now on that latest post I did? And, I've gotten to the point where it's really under control. I mean, it's been under control for a while now, but from a user point of view, whatever their source of dopamine is from social media, whether it's their own posts or watching other people's posts, relative to what they've experienced, it still can be just as powerful. And so we have to learn how to live and keep it under control. And so then the end of the book talks about how can we keep this under control to not sabotage the most important things in our life, which are relationships with real people.
Yeah, right. And hopefully that's what the young people understand, is that the real people and your real relationships and actually communicating with your voice and talking to someone in person, one-to-one, is really what this life is about, not across the internet. Did you ever see, I'm sure you did with your research, but Black Mirror, do you watch that show?
Yeah, I've seen some of them. Yeah. Because I used to really be into the Twilight Zone when I was younger.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Black Mirror is the best kind of Twilight Zone-esque thing that we have. today, I think, even better than the Twilight Zone reboot that was pretty good, but it's not as good as Black Mirror. But there's this one episode that is just, it's so disturbing. And it's where they live in the building and they have to ride the bicycles to get like stationary bicycles to get these points. And then everything around them is screens and there aren't windows. And in order to swipe the advertisement away, they have to use some of their points. And then they get more social points by getting likes by someone. And they just, everything is about these points. And then if you use up all your points, then you're just overrun with these porn ads and just ads. You can't stop them. And this guy gets up and he's brushing his teeth and the mirror turns into a screen. And it's like this ad. And at first, he's just swiping it. But the only way that you can go get more points is to ride on this bicycle. And so they're all constantly just riding this bicycle and living in this world without windows and not going outside. And it's just very disturbing. I think that's the most disturbing Black Mirror of all. Now, it was entertaining too, because it's like, wow, we move to a world like that this social media deal grows into something that is just pervasive around you everywhere, and every wall is a screen. And I don't know, that's a scary world. If that's it, I'm moving to Alaska or somewhere. I don't want to live in that world.
They have mirrors in Alaska too.
They do. I know, but you would have to. They also have places in Alaska that don't have mirrors.
Right. You just pitch a tent on the Kenai, and then you'll be good.
Well, that's where I'm going. I'm going to the Kenai in a week or so. And have you fished there?
That's great.
Have you?
I went fishing there a few years ago with some buddies, and we were in the river casting, and it was amazing. It was amazing, and it's fun reeling in a salmon. They're tough fighters.
Yeah, I can't wait to go. I'm hoping we're gonna see some bears and stuff. I don't want to see them up close, but I do like the Alaskan bears because they're much more well fed than the Yellowstone bears, and they seem to be a little bit more into what they're doing, eating salmon rather than eating you. So I'm looking, although I have a healthy respect for Alaskan bears too, and I don't want any problem with bears. So I don't want any karma. I'm being very careful about what I say because I know I'm going to be around them here coming up soon. But by the way, get to your spot on the river super early, because the spot we were at, and we had a guide, we had to get there super early because, it's like, that's your territory. People get very territorial when they're waiting in that spot in the river. So get there early. That'd be my advice. Yeah. We're also going to be going to some places where I don't think it's going to be quite as crowded, but I don't know. This is a busy time of the year up there, just judging by, trying to make our reservations for accommodations. It was difficult. I'm like, this is Alaska, right? Like, we're going to Alaska. You're full. Everybody's full, but it's the tourist, it's the tourist time. You don't want to, not a lot of tourists are going there and when it's cold and wet, I guess. So now it's beautiful and sunny. So that's when people go there. Brian, how do people get your book? You're on pre-order. I already pre-ordered it on Audible, and you said that you're reading it, right?
Reading the book, and it's a marathon, triathlon in a literary sense to read a book. I spent last weekend and the weekend before in the studio, and the reason why I decided to read the book, even though it's so much more work for me to do it versus a professional who does it all the time, is because I've listened to books before, and when I don't hear the author read it, I feel like a little shortchanged. Mm-hmm. It's like, I would really love to hear them say it in their own words because it's their book.
Yeah.
And so I did it because I wanted to have the listeners have that experience, the full experience. And also with the intonations, and sometimes there's some humor, and then I know the humor because I wrote it, so I can deliver that more on point. But boy, it was that. I mean, I mentioned even last week and yesterday was day 4 of being in the studio for like 6 hours at a clip, and you're in a little booth with headphones with the producer, and then the audio engineer, and you're back and forth. Oh, say this again a little differently. It's so exhausting, but
really,
only have about 3 hours left in the studio and I'm done. And I already feel like it's going to be a huge accomplishment again, just to finish reading the book.
Wow.
So
that's awesome. I guess when you're, I don't know if there's any way that you can, necessarily, like a good producer or a good audio engineer would, like occasionally when I read or listen to audiobooks, and I listen to a lot of them, you'll notice that there'll be a break where the author's voice was a certain way, and then it's just slightly different, and then it starts again, and I can tell, well, that was the next day. Like he came back, he's fresh right there, and it's just slightly different. But if you had any sort of a cold or anything like that, that makes a huge difference in the way that your voice sounds, and then when the listener is listening to it, like for 6 hours at a time, they notice every little piece of that. So I guess that you have to be very careful when you're doing this to maintain, the same type of voice, which would mean probably getting plenty of rest and not yelling and screaming at your daughter's volleyball game the night before. Like, I don't know. Exactly. What are the things that you have to think about when you're reading like that? Did they give you any tips about like maintaining voice consistency?
Well, certainly getting good rest is really important, especially between the days. Mm-hmm. So for me, because I'm working during the week, I can't record like during the week. So for me, it's been weekends. So like that Friday night, I make sure I went to bed early on Saturday night. We were even out to dinner with some friends, and I'm like, you know what? I need to get up and I really need my sleep. So I'm going to have to skip dessert, guys.
How'd that go over?
I was like, and they understood, but I had no problems just kind of like pulling the plug, because like, I know I need to be on, but also like when you're doing this in the studio, you're not actually recording 6 hours straight. So, you may need to take breaks. The producer, because they're very experienced, they can hear when you start to sound a little fadey, and they're like, let's take a 5-minute break, stand up, walk around. And it was funny because in yesterday's session, we were, getting through a big chunk, and she's like, I think we were supposed to end at 4. And I said, okay, let's take a break, like you said, but has anyone come back at the end of the day like this and had literally like a second wind? And she's like, no. And the engineer was like, no, never. And, these are people with years of experience. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be special. So what I did is I did a bunch of air squats.
Yeah.
I did a bunch of push-ups. I did like some high knee, runs down the hall, and I had a little bit of coffee. And I came back and they were like, holy smokes, like you're really doing great.
The benefit of exercise. That's awesome, man. And so how much longer did you go? Another couple hours or what?
No. Then we went like about 40 more minutes because we were already over time, actually.
Gotcha.
So, but I wanted to try to get in a little more to finish that one chapter. That was actually chapter 11. So it's a 12-chapter book with then a conclusion and an epilogue. So actually tomorrow or Wednesday, I'm going to be finishing that rest of it. So it'll be about 3.5 hours and 3 hours, and I'll be done. So, so people, like you said, where can they get the book? It's everywhere books are sold. But Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much everywhere, you can find the book.
All right. And what's it called?
Hard copy and of course the audiobook.
What's the title?
Influenced: The Impact of Social Media on Our Perception.
All right. By Dr. Brian Boxer Wachler. Right on.
And by the way, I will mention, I feel really honored. I have some great people who endorsed the book.
Yeah.
Like Gronkowski, NFL star.
Yes.
And he had some awesome things to say about the book, and which is actually on the book itself. When you get endorsements, the publisher likes to put them on the book or inside the book.
Right.
And also Dr. Pimple Popper, Sandra Lee also gave a wonderful endorsement about the book, and just a lot of other influencers as well. So I'm very grateful that it's been so well received by people in the know.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's really great because it is a sensitive subject that, like, are you telling people that they shouldn't be on social media, or are like from an influencer, like, well, we don't want to tell them they shouldn't be on social media. We want to just, like, I don't know. Well, like, that's interesting. It's kind of an interesting perspective of like, where are you going with this? I don't know if I want to endorse your book. I'm going to have to read it first to see if it's going to be good for business or bad for business. But I think it's just responsible social media, right? It's like,
and that's why they endorsed it, because they realize this is a really important book for people to have, whether they're parents or adults or even teenagers, because it's, like I said, taking a balanced view and a fair view of social media, and really to help inform people and ultimately how to live healthy in a healthy way and have healthy relationships with social media and those people, and also balance it with your real world as well. So that's why they endorsed it, because they felt this is a really important information. It's a very important book that people should get their hands on, so to speak.
I love it. So when will it be out? I pre-ordered. When I can't wait to read it. So when will it be out?
It's coming out officially end of October, and as soon as Amazon gets the shipment, they don't wait till the end of October. Once they get the shipment, then they're going to start sending copies. So people, if they pre-order, they may get the book within even a couple of days, depending.
Okay. So, well, we're going to try to publish this right around the date. So if you're listening to this right now, it's available probably right now, and you should go get it. All right. That's great. Well, Dr. Brian, thank you very much for helping us out to learn a little bit more about social media. I think it's a super important topic, and I'm glad to see you write the book about it.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure seeing you, as always, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll have to go fishing again. All right.
Oh, love it.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you later.
Okay, bye, Tom.